Hey guys, welcome back to the Mastering the Full Stack Clone video series. And today we are going to look at the booking.com application. And we basically want to implement this React feature over here. This is the date range feature where we can actually select the start date and the end date. And so it will be displayed over here as well. So when we click, the calendar should disappear, and when we click again it should come back. So we will be implementing this calendar in our application right now. So let's start. Right now our application is empty. So first of all, I have a little bit of structure and CSS done already. I will discuss this as we go. So let's start. Okay, first of all, as you can see, I have created a div, and inside that container div, we have a span. So let's just write some static information here, like for example, start date to end date. Okay. As you can see, it's here now. So what we want to do here is that when we click over here, we should be able to see the calendar over here. Okay. So in order to display the calendar, we have to actually install a React date range library. So we have to search for that React date range library. So let's go to this first one, npm.js. Okay. So on this website, we have this repository. Let's go to this GitHub repository. And on this repository, you can see that we need to first install these two, the React date range and the date FNS. So I have already installed these two, but you can just copy it and go over here in the terminal, just paste it, and then you can press enter and install these two dependency libraries. I already have done it, so I'm not going to install it again. And then once you have installed it, you should go to your package.json file, and here in the dependencies, you will check if they are installed. So I already have the date FNS, and I will already have the React date range library in the dependencies. Okay, so now this was step one. Then we have to actually go to this one, date range picker, not this date picker. We'll go to the date range picker because we want to pick the range of dates. So this is an example that they have given us. So first of all, we're going to just copy this import because we want to import the date range picker. So we're going to just write that over here. So once we're done with that, as you can see, this is a class component. So it's going to look different than what we have because we are using the functional component. These days, everybody uses functional component. So we have to modify this code according to our needs. So first of all, let's just copy this date range picker element. And we are going to put it just below the span tag over here. Okay. So once we have that, all right. So in order to show the date ranges over here, in a functional component, you need to use a hook, use state hook. So we are gonna first of all say const date set date equals to use state. Okay, so we are gonna import use state from React. So let's just go over here and say import use state from React, like so. So in the use state, we have this. Now we also have to add a initial value to this use state. So for that, we are going to take this object from here. We're going to copy that, and we are going to put that object over here. And let me explain you what this object is about. So this is the initial value of the use state, which will be the initial value of this date, of course. So in this object, we have three values. First one is the key value pair, which is start date equals to new date, which means that the start date at the start will be the current date. Okay, so new date parentheses will give you the current date. For example, today is 8th July, so it's going to show you 8th of July. Okay. Similarly, end date, we also have set it by default to the current date, and then key selection. Okay. So the key is equal to the selection. So we're going to select this start date to end date. All right. And here in the date range picker, you can see we have ranges attribute equal to selection range. So we're going to change that to date because we have date over here. Let's paste date instead of selection range. So we're going to put our date. So now our ranges from the start date to the end date will be this default one. Okay. And we are for now, let's just change this on change to just a basic callback function so that it doesn't give us any error. Okay. All right. So let me go and see. So as you can see now, after adding the initial value date over here in the ranges, now we can see the calendar. But there is a problem. We need to style it. Not to worry, we have to go back to our repository. And here, let me find, yeah, these two lines. So if we copy this, these two lines are the CSS for the calendar. So we are just going to go here and we're going to paste these two imports over here. Once we paste them, you can see now our calendar is styled properly. Now we need to push this calendar down here. For that, I have already done some styling. I have set the container position to relative so that I can push the date range relative to the container down. And I have put position absolute for the date range and top 120 pixels. So it's going to push from 120 pixel down from the top, this calendar. So let me just copy this date range and apply it here in the date range. Let's just write class name, paste it. So now we have the class name date range over here. And as you can see that our date range is now set in the right place. Now, as I said, the initial value of the start date and end date are the current date. Okay. So that's why it's only going to show current date over here. But what we want is that when we select a certain date range, it should actually show over here. It should be selected. In order to do that, we need to create an on change event. Okay. So in this date range picker, we need to actually come here and say on change. So we need to use an on change event in the date picker. And let me see, change equals to curly braces. Okay. Oh, sorry. I already have an on change event. What am I doing? I'm sorry about that. Okay, so here we have the on change event. All right. So let's give it a name. So on change equals to a method called handle change. So we need to now create this handle change method. So we're going to go above return and we're going to say const handle change equals to simple callback function. So handle change equals to callback function. Now, inside the handle change, we are going to call this set date because we want to, this is the setter. This sets the date to a new state. Okay. So here we are going to just simply call the set date parentheses. Okay. Inside the set date, we are going to call a callback function. Sorry, we're not going to call it callback function. We are actually going to pass a param here called ranges because we want to select these ranges, right? So we're going to say ranges dot selection. Okay, so we are selecting the start to end date range. As you can even see over here, it has ranges equals to data. Okay, so we're just selecting the ranges from start date to the end date. So ranges dot selection. Once we have done that, now we can set the date range. So if I select from 10th to 14th, as you can see now, it is updating over here. If we select from 16 to 31st, as you can see, 16 July to 31st July. So we have successfully made this method handle change. And whenever we do any change, this on change event triggers this handle change method, and the handle change method sets the new date that we have selected. All right. So we're done with this. Now, the next step is that when we click on this span, this date range should disappear. And when we click again, it should again appear. So right now that's not working. So we need to do something about it. So this time we are going to use the on click event on this span. So where's the span? This is the span. Let me check if I have already done the on click. No. Okay. On click. All right. So on click, we are gonna basically put another method here. Let's say handle click. So we name it handle click, and here we're gonna create another method, handle click equals to a simple fat arrow function, or you can call it callback function. Okay, so in the handle click, we need to, oh, before we do that, actually, we also need to create another use state, because in order to do that, we need to create a use state. All right, so const, we're going to say open date, set open date equals to use state. Okay, use state parentheses and false. By default, we're going to set it to false. Okay, what are we actually doing here? Let me explain. So we have two states here. The initial state will be false. The open date will initially be false, and the set open date will actually make it true. Okay, so if I put this open date over here, let me go over here. So yeah, okay. So this is the date range picker. If I wrap this with a curly braces, and if I say, let's put a JavaScript statement here, open date and. We're going to use the and operator here. So what does that mean? You can see that the date is disappeared. So the calendar is gone. Why? Because it says open date and, which means that if the open date is true, then you can return this JSX element, date range picker. If it's not true, then obviously it's not going to return. So since open date is by default false, that's why we can't see the date range. But if I change the false to true, you can see that now you're able to see the date range. Okay. So let's turn that back to false, and let's see how we can do that. So handle click, here we come. Okay. So in the handle click method, we are gonna call the set open date method. We're gonna call the set open date, and then we're gonna say not open date. Okay. This is not a good way of doing it. It can cause errors, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm showing you like this. So set open date, not open date. So when we call the set open date, it should set the actual state of the open date from false to true. So not open date means true. If the open date is true, then this will not open date will mean it will turn it to false. So now if I click over here, you can see that we can see the calendar. If we click again, it goes away. Why? Because not open date means that if the open date is false, not open date means turn it to true. If the open date is true, then turn its state to false, which is the opposite. So that's why this is how it's working. But now let's make it better. So we're going to call another callback function here. This is a better way of doing it. So we're going to call back. We're going to do a callback function here. But in here, we're going to just write previous state. So whatever the previous state is, when we call this callback function, it should change the previous state to not previous state. So if the previous state is true, again, it will turn to false. And if it's true, if it's false, it's going to turn to true. So here it works. All right. I hope I have made it clear. So this function simply does this, that when it's when the previous state is, let's say, false, if you click on click, it should change the state to true and vice versa. Okay, so now we are done with this thing and the date range. These features are done. There are a couple of things left. First of all, I'm seeing that if current date is 8th, so we should not be able to select these previous dates for booking hotels because those dates are already gone. So we need to disable them. For that, we will go to the date range picker and we're going to say min date. So minimum date should be new date. Yeah, new date means current date. Okay, so min date should be new date. That way we have, now you can see the cross over here. So now we cannot select the dates before the current date. Okay, so new date parentheses means current date. Okay, that's also done. What else is left? Yeah, one more thing is left, that the start date and end date. This is a static value. We want to dynamically put the date range over here, whatever date range we select over here. Just like it's updating over here, it should also update in this span tag as well. For that, we are now going to import another thing over here, import format. So we're going to import format from date FNS. You remember we installed date FNS in the start. So date FNS is for creating the format for displaying over here, date format. So as you can see over here, let me show you. You can see that the npm install react date FNS. If you haven't installed it, just install it. And after that, let's see. So we are going to go over here. Let's delete that. So we're going to delete that and we are going to write curly braces over here. Inside the curly braces, we are going to write backticks. And inside the backticks, we are going to say $, curly braces. Just bear with me for a second. I'm going to explain what I'm doing. So $, curly braces, format, parentheses. And so why are we writing backticks? We are writing backticks because the format function that we just imported, we actually want to call it here. So in order to call it here, we need to use backticks and then $, curly brackets, and then inside it we can use the format. And this format function has two things. It returns two conditions. First one is the date, which should be the first date first. So we're going to say date dot start date, okay, comma, the format. So format will be month, day, year, okay, like so. So now you can see that whatever date I select, the first date is showing, the start date is showing. And we are using this dot notation because, as you can see, the date is an object which has start date and end date. So if you want to access start date, you have to write date dot notation, date dot format. Sorry, date dot start date dot end date to access the information inside the date. Okay. All right. So here we are. Now we are just inside the backticks. We are going to say from start date to end date. So we're just going to copy this same thing so that we don't, so that we can save time. And here we go. And here we are just going to change this to end date, and that's it. So now you can see that we have the start date and the end date, and whatever we select here, let's say we select 9th July to 31st July, you can see that now it's updating over here as well. So, yep, I think that's about it. Everything is covered, and this is how we implement the date range inside our application. So thank you for watching this video, and until next time, take care, goodbye, see you in the next tutorial.